we know what time it is. It's video time again. So this week we are doing some winter book recommendations. They are not groundbreaking, they are not original, but they are what I am reading or hoping to read or have read in winter before. So unfortunately, what you saw in the intro is not how it looks where I live. We did manage to get a little bit of snow at the beginning of December, but that is very strange, actually. It's actually 12 degrees outside. I am sweating a bit wearing this, but we're here for the vibes. We're here for the winter vibes, the snowy vibes. So here are 6 books that I will personally be reading or rereading over the winter season. So the first book is one that I have been reading for the last 20 years. I am currently halfway through it again. It's the first time I'm rereading it in a few years, actually, and it's still as great as it ever was. It's Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, or The Golden Compass if you're in America. For some reason you needed a different title because reasons? Who knows? So this is ostensibly a children's book, which I completely disagree with. At the very least, I think it's young adult. If not adult, there are some really dark themes in this book, some really adult and complicated themes, and it's one of the reasons why I love it so much. But the first half of the book takes place in the south of England. I don't think the season's really specified, but in the second half they move north to the bleak Arctic Circle and the snow and the ice and the bears and the witches, and it's just delicious to read it when you're cozy at home and it's snowing outside. I did manage to read some of it when it was snowing outside, which was awesome. So in this book we follow Lyra, who is a 12-year-old girl. She is an orphan and she lives at Jordan College in Oxford, and she's just there enjoying herself, living her best life as a wee savage. She's like fighting with other kids and stealing boats and making up stories and just generally like getting into stuff. But then she overhears some talk about the north, about the aurora, about dust with a capital D, which is something that affects adults and not children, not until they reach adolescence. And she starts dreaming about going north and exploring. But then shortly after this, children start disappearing, one of which is her best friend Roger from the kitchen. And she obviously wants to go and rescue him, but soon afterwards she is taken from her life at Jordan and starts to get wrapped up in these events about the disappearing children and going north to rescue them. And all of these darker themes come into play. This is traditionally marketed as a children's book, but there is violence, there is death, there is murder, there are really cruel experiments on children, there's betrayal. Like, I have read this so many times, but reading it again for the first time in my 30s, it hits differently. So in this world, everyone's soul lives outside of their body as an animal, and when you're young, it's called your demon, and your demon can change forms. And when you hit adolescence, it kind of settles down into one form, becomes one animal, and that sort of tells you a bit about your personality. Like, the kind of animal that it becomes tells you a bit about your personality. I wondered a bit about the fact that all servants' demons are dogs. Like servants are subservient by nature, like that's a bit problematic. But the older I get, the less I am okay with seeing anything even mildly bad happen to an animal. And although these are technically people's souls, they look like animals, and I'm not happy about some of the things that happen in this book. I still love it. I still love it so much. It's still fantastic. I will continue rereading it until the day I die. But it's very thematic for winter. If you haven't picked this up already, it's the perfect time of year to give it a go. Although it is 400 pages, it's an easy 400 pages. The audiobook is it's not even 12 hours long. And if you enjoy this one, then great news. It's the first in a trilogy. The other 2 are also fantastic. Not very winter themed, but they continue the story and you won't be sorry for reading them. I get that other people do have different tastes, and I'm sure there are people that can read this and dislike it. And what I have to say to those people is, you are fucking wrong. You are wrong. Okay? Okay. I'm joking. You can dislike it if you want, but I will judge you. I will judge you heavily. So that's recommendation number 1. My second winter recommendation is also the first in a trilogy. I haven't read the second 2 of these, but they are on my TBR and I will be reading them very soon. I haven't got them yet, although I have a feeling I'm getting them for Christmas. So they will be in my New Year TBR. But it is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. So this wasn't a perfect book for me. I think I gave it 4 stars. However, what it does really well is atmosphere. So it starts off with all the family gathering round the oven, round the fire in the kitchen to listen to a fairy story from the old nurse. And it's cold outside, it's winter, and this is what this book feels like. It feels like gathering round the fire when it's cold and dark outside to listen to a fairy tale. And that's just perfect for the winter. Her writing is just really atmospheric, it's very descriptive, it's very beautiful. In the book, it does take place over many years. We follow the main character, Vasya, from before she was born, from her conception to her birth, all the way through to adolescence. So it's over the course of many years, but winter does play a huge role in the story, and most of the climactic and important events take place in winter. So the story is kind of like if you took a really sanitized version of Game of Thrones and crossed it with some Russian folklore and fairy tales. Well, I don't mean this book is completely sanitized, but just it's not nearly as excessive as Game of Thrones when it comes to the sex and violence. But if you've read it, I think you'll know what I mean by that. So the main character, Vasya, lives with her family in the north of what is now Russia, although in the 14th century, I think it's the 14th century when this is set, Russia didn't exist as a political state. And although the area is now Christian, her family and the other villagers, they still observe the old traditions of leaving offerings for the house spirits and the spirits of the forest and such. However, Vasya is one of the only ones that can actually see these spirits. Vasya is a bit like Lyra, she's a bit wild, she's a bit unruly, but she's essentially happy until her new stepmother and a new priest arrive in the village to disrupt her life. Now, obviously I can't speak about the rest of the trilogy as I've not read it yet, but considering that the spirit of winter is a character, I assume that they will also thematise winter and would also be good winter reads. I hope that they stand up to the first because I really did enjoy this. I finished it in 2 days. So again, it's like 450 pages, but it was a pretty easy 450 pages for me. So if you're into fairy tales and atmospheric winter descriptions, then this would be a great book to pick up and read in winter. My next recommendation, I don't actually have a copy of this anymore. I got this about 10 years ago. I reviewed it for my university's Review of the Arts e-zine, and since then I've donated it, but I think it would be perfect for winter reading, and that is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. So rather than me trying to remember a book that I read 10 years ago and haven't read since, I am just going to read you the review that I wrote 10 years ago because I think it encapsulates what I want to say about it very well.
They said, "I must die." In 1829, Agnes Magnusdottir and 2 others are condemned to death for murder and arson. Lacking a suitable prison, Agnes is held in the intimate domestic setting of a family farm to await her execution, where she inspires both fear and fascination in its inhabitants and is visited by the young priest that she has chosen to be in charge of her salvation. Agnes's story is told from a variety of perspectives, the most powerful of which is her own. From the outset, we are told that there is more to this tale than meets the eye, all of which is gradually revealed as winter and the execution date draw closer. Burial Rites is a heady concoction of love, hate, claustrophobia and betrayal set against the backdrop of a bleak and harsh northern landscape. Much of the book's intensity lies in its setting. Iceland is a country that seems more foreign than most, in a land where the sun never sets during summer and barely rises in winter, where the climate makes the line between life and death that much thinner. The passions, hatreds and lives of its people seem to burn that much brighter. They are candle flames, greasy bright, fluttering in the darkness and the howl of the wind. Images of flames and fire are used throughout the novel, especially in relation to the passion between Agnes and her lover Nathan, the weight of his fingers on mine, like a bird landing on a branch. It was the drop of the match. I did not realise that we were surrounded by tinder until I felt it burst into flames. Those figurative fires are so intense that they eventually set light to the physical world, the burning farmhouse being one of the most enduring images of the novel. By linking the execution with winter, Kent links the fading of light, warmth and life with the fading of Agnes herself. Revealing her story in small chunks draws the reader onwards and adds to the easy flow of the text. Weak points in Burial Rites' narrative style or characterisation are rare. If one consequence of using multiple narrators is a failure to focus fully on Agnes, and perhaps weakening the story, such a strategy also allows us to see events from all sides. Whilst Kent's narrative style is emotionally engaging, the plot can let the book down. Whilst the desire to discover what really happened keeps us turning pages, such a highly charged build-up can leave us feeling disappointed at actual events. The murders themselves cannot match the intensity of the rest of the book, and likewise the overall finale seems to lack punch when compared with what preceded it. It is an event which should have stayed with the reader long after reading, but instead is quickly forgotten. Much like a monster under the bed that is terrifying only as a shadow, its power shrinks when brought into the light. Despite these few flaws, Burial Rites is an exceptional first novel and an extremely absorbing read. A story of love and hate, of light and dark, fire and ice. Kent's novel is about judgment, betrayal, and ultimately, humanity. The candle flame that burns brighter in darkness.
So as you can see, what I did enjoy about this book most was the atmosphere, and I think it makes it perfect for a long winter's night and cozying up at home when it's cold outside. My next recommendation is another one that I don't actually own a copy because I got it out of the library earlier this year, and it was one of my really unexpected 5-star reads of 2023, and that is The Boy Made of Snow by Chloe Meyer. So I don't know what it is, but I think that fairy tales and fairy tale retellings are just really perfect for winter, or especially the run up to Christmas. I don't know if it's something about trying to recapture the magic of childhood at Christmas time, but this book isn't it's not really a fairy tale retelling. It does heavily thematise fairy tales and particularly makes a lot of references to the Snow Queen. It's also not set exclusively in winter. However, the climax of the book does take place during an extreme blizzard. So it's got snow in the title, there's some snow in the book, and it references the Snow Queen. It's also about fairy tales. Definitely a winter read. It's also quite bleak. The story, be prepared. I was not expecting this to be as dark as it was, especially because it doesn't really give those vibes to start with. Now, generally, I will enjoy a story that lulls you into a false sense of security by seeming quite light-hearted and whimsical and then sucker punching you with the trauma. Obviously, it depends on the book. It depends on how it's done. But I have enjoyed these kind of stories in the past because I feel like you get a much greater emotional impact from the tragedy when you're set up with the lightheartedness. The juxtaposition really makes you feel it more strongly. And this is one of those stories. So it takes place in a small village in England during the Second World War. You have a mother, Annabelle, and her son, Daniel, and you get the story through both of their points of view. Now, even though the setup is already quite dark. Now, Annabelle has a difficult relationship with her son because she suffered severely from postnatal depression after he was born, and she's never really gotten over it. She still has no real maternal feelings for him. She kind of just feels like he's in the way. She drinks a lot, and she's only just really keeping up appearances for the neighbours and for the grandparents so that they don't come in and try to basically commit her to an asylum. But the one thing that she does have in common with Daniel is that they both love fairy tales, and Daniel loves them because they're the only way that he's able to connect to his mother is through these fairy tales. And so he basically views the whole world through the lens of fairy tales, and his point of view is very whimsical. He's always imagining the world as a fairy tale. Like, he's adamant that the homeless man that lives under the bridge is a troll. But they're rubbing along side by side. Things aren't great, but they're getting by until some German prisoners of war are brought to be held at a nearby farm. And one of them is this man, Hans. And both Annabelle and Daniel meet Hans, and they both read their own kind of fantasies and desires onto him. But Hans is his own person with his own motivations and desires. And we start to see fairy tale and reality collide with some really brutal consequences. There's more than 2 deaths in the book, but there's 2 deaths that are particularly uncomfortable. And one of them because we see it, and one of them because we don't. I am quite a sensitive person. This did stay with me a bit afterwards, but in a good way, I suppose. I didn't feel like it traumatized me. However, if you're like me and you're a bit sensitive, maybe be a little bit careful with it. I've seen reviewers say that because they didn't realise that it was going to get that dark, they didn't like that because they were expecting one thing and they got another. As I said, I kind of enjoy that in stories, but I suppose it can be a little bit shocking. So maybe be careful with it, but I would still recommend it if you want to give it a go. It was a 5-star for me, and I think it's also thematically a winter read. Okay, so my next one, I don't know if other people will agree with me that this is a winter read, but I have my reasons and I will stake my point. So it is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I don't have just The Fellowship, I only have my extremely battered and sellotaped copy of the complete set. But The Fellowship, it might not obviously be a winter book, but it absolutely is. So to start with, maybe I am also influenced by the fact that for me, The Lord of the Rings are Christmas movies. You cannot argue me out of this. They came out at Christmas, I went to see them in the cinema at Christmas, and I got the VHS of the first one. Actually, that's showing my age. I got the VHS and or DVDs for Christmas when they were released. I also watched them at Christmas. I watched The Fellowship of the Ring last week. They're Christmas movies. So now that we've got that out of the way and that we've agreed that I'm right, let's talk about The Fellowship of the Ring. Do I need to summarise the plot of Lord of the Rings at this point? Short man has magic ring, goes on journey, it destroys him as he tries to destroy it, so on and so forth. But I think Tolkien really deliberately aligned the books with the seasons. So Frodo sets out on his journey on the 22nd of September, which is his birthday and also Bilbo's birthday. It's also the autumn equinox, which, okay, sometimes falls on the 23rd, but it's around then. So he sets out at the beginning of celestial autumn, and he arrives in Rivendell a month later at the end of October. And he doesn't set out for Mordor until the 25th of December. So Tolkien is aligning the fading season, the gathering dark, the creeping in of the cold with the events of the book. So until Frodo sets out on his journey, he's been in the summer of his life. He's been living this life of plenty and safety in the Shire, where he has all his needs met. He never has to be afraid of anything or go anywhere. But then the Black Riders, the Nazgul, have crept into the Shire in the same way that the cold starts to creep in at the beginning of autumn. And honestly, I think the first book of the Fellowship, so the first half of the Fellowship, is probably my favourite part of the whole of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And not just that, the section from Hobbiton to Buckland, where it's Frodo, Sam and Merry and they're being pursued by the Black Riders, that's probably my favourite sequence in the whole book, because it just has the best tension where they think they're safe, and then slowly it's like, this rider, what is he? We don't know, but we're afraid of him. The tension, it's delicious. I love it. Just this something uncanny and terrifying that's crept into what should be a safe space. And I think that represents the onset of autumn. And as I said, Frodo then sets out from Rivendell to Mordor on the 25th of December, which is Christmas Day. And what is Christmas if not the Christianized version of the pagan celebration to celebrate the winter solstice? The winter solstice falls around about the 22nd-ish of December. And when the Christian conquerors were trying to civilize the savage pagans, they overlapped Christian festivals and traditions onto the pagan ones to make them more palatable. So that's why Christ's birthday is apparently the 25th of December. And unlike the first one, this is a much darker journey which fits with the season. We also have an explicitly snowy scene where they try to cross Caradhras, and you cannot tell me that this is not a winter book. You just cannot tell me it's not a winter book. So, if you somehow have not read Lord of the Rings, then winter might be the best time to pick up the first one. I am absolutely biased about Tolkien. Tolkien was my introduction to fantasy. It's strange for me to see fantasy fans these days that haven't read Tolkien, which I'm not going to gatekeep. You know, you're still a fantasy fan. It's just because it's so seminal, it just never occurred to me that there were fantasy fans out there who hadn't read it or didn't plan on reading it. But hey, different strokes, different folks, different experiences. I will always recommend Tolkien. It can be hard going. There's a lot of songs. I've been listening to the audiobook of The Fellowship, and I hate Tom Bombadil even more on the audiobook because Andy Serkis sings all of his dialogue, even the bits that aren't like formal songs. He sings it all, and I cannot with that. I just, no. So yeah, Tolkien, it can be a bit of a slog, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to understand such an important book in the fantasy canon, to see what so many people were either trying to replicate or trying to get as far away from as they could. Like, if you were writing fantasy in the years after Tolkien, you could not write it without being influenced by him. You were either trying to be him or you were trying to not be him. So reading all three together might be a bit much, but if you want to give it a go, I would recommend Fellowship of the Ring. It's a winter book. Give it a go this Christmas. So the next recommendation is the most obvious and the most cliche, but it is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. It might be cliche, but I do not have to justify it being on this list. Everybody knows the story of Ebenezer Scrooge the Miser, who was visited by three ghosts of Christmas, past, present and future, who made him change his ways. This story is fundamental and integral to the cultural understanding of Christmas. It's been adapted so many times. I watch Muppets Christmas Carol every year. We always watch the same Christmas movies, and I think it's the same sentiment to return to the book. I think if you have watched or seen any version of A Christmas Carol, it's worth going back and just seeing where the story came from, the original, because there is no other single story that has had such an impact on our understanding of Christmas. And what I want to call the mythology of Christmas, although I don't think that's quite the right word. But like returning to your favourite Christmas movies, reading A Christmas Carol is part of the build up to Christmas for me. So this is another one that will be on my winter reading list very soon. And if you haven't read it, it's worth reading it just to know where the story came from, just to see the origins of something that is so culturally important. And my last recommendation, again, I don't have a physical copy. I did have the complete set of all 7 books until maybe a few months before I decided I was starting a booktube channel. They were the same copies that I had since I was about 10 years old. I donated them, I was decluttering. I kind of regret it now, but hey, that's life. And it is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Again, not a great surprise, not very original, but I think it's perfect, especially in the run-up to Christmas. I think this is a great read because I think at Christmas time we all get a bit nostalgic. I think when we're children, Christmas is just so magical and exciting, and I remember just asking my mum, like, how many days is it now until Santa comes? How many days is it now until Santa comes? And it just felt like Like the week before just felt like the longest thing. You remember not being able to sleep or eat on Christmas Eve, just so wired with excitement. Christmas was amazing as a child. And honestly, I fell out of love with it for a lot of years because I think parents can recapture some of that magic with their own children. I choose not to have children, so I don't have that. And Christmas can be a difficult time. It can be a difficult time where everyone's meant to be happy and together, and if you're not happy and together, it can make you feel more miserable. Suicides go up at Christmas, domestic abuse goes up at Christmas. Like, you know, I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade here, but it can be a difficult time, and I think we should acknowledge that. But I also think that that's why we all get a bit nostalgic for our childhood at Christmas. We're all trying to recapture some of that magic that we remember that's just not there as much as you get older. And generations of us have read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, have watched the adaptations. I don't know which one exactly it was, but there was a cartoon version that I used to watch at my granny's house. It would be on the TV at Christmas time. So I think it's a perfect book for a lot of people to kind of just go back and recapture some of that childhood magic. It's full of snow, you know, so again, if you've been living under a rock for the last 70 years, the basic premise of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe is that 4 children are evacuated during the Blitz in the Second World War, and in the house that they're evacuated to, they find a portal to Narnia in the back of a wardrobe. Narnia is ruled over by a white witch who has made it so that it is always winter and never Christmas. But there is a prophecy that she can be defeated by 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, which, hey, guess what? That's what the kids are. And when her power starts to break, Father Christmas arrives. So it's overtly a Christmas story, in my eye. I think it's kind of funny, actually, that both C.S. Lewis and Philip Pullman are on this list, because Lewis was very overt in his Christian references and morality that he sandwiched into his books. And Philip Pullman absolutely hates that about him. And in his books, or at least his Dark Materials trilogy, the church is oppressive and dictatorial and just religion itself is the enemy in those books. So I thought that was quite interesting. Tolkien itself, there's a lot of Christian references in Tolkien, although I don't think he was as heavy-handed as C.S. Lewis was. There's just a wee bit of commentary to end the list. Okay, so it has been a strange day. I was not sure that this video was going to get made. We managed to gratitude meditate our way out of it a little bit, so hey, another video down. That's 10 videos, 2 more to go until I hit my goal of 12, and then God knows what's going to happen. But if you're here until the end, thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here and listening to me and taking an interest in my opinions. If you would like to stick around, please like and subscribe. I try to post videos every Saturday. That's not a strict schedule, but is what I try to stick to. And I'm just hoping to continue to get better, to make better videos that are entertaining and maybe informative for you guys. So thank you, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!